Okay, today we actually get to assemble this bag and I'm really excited. On Wednesday we cut out all the pieces and so we're ready to go. You will need your sewing machine. I've got my iron and ironing board nearby. I've got my pattern, pins, coordinating thread. My white is already loaded in the machine. And then a seam guide is going to be useful. Remember that our seam allowances are 1/2 inch in every direction. And other than that, we can go. I am going to, just to make things easier as we go, this is my inside fabric, this darker grayish one. This is my outside fabric. I have 2 of these. I have 2 of the canvas, 1, 2, 3 bottoms, and then I have 2 canvas, 2 fabric, and then 2 more fabric pockets. So the first thing that we're going to do, and you can do this anyway, you can try and just read the pattern and go without me, totally okay, and then check back in if you have any questions, or if that overwhelms you, just go along with me the whole time and that's totally fine too. So we're going to start with our outside fabric, our main fabric, and our canvas pieces, 1 for each. And I'm going to lay my canvas flat, and then my fabric, this might feel wrong, but it's going to be right side up on the canvas. And I'm just going to line it all up nicely, and then we're going to pin it together, and we're going to stitch from the top to the bottom on both sides, and we're going to do that for this one, and then we're going to do it a second time with this one. And that might feel funny at first, like it might not make sense, but it does. We're just kind of laying the foundation for this canvas being the lining for the bag. So let's go ahead and pin these to the fabric and then head over to the machine. Alright, we have our outside bag fabric pinned to our canvas with the right side facing out, and we're just going to run a quick basting stitch, if you remember what a basting stitch is, just down both the outside of both sides. A basting stitch is going to be about a 4 or a 5 stitch lengthwise. It'll be a straight stitch, and I want to remind you, our seam allowance is 1/2 inch, but because this is a basting stitch, we want to be able to do this stitch within that 1/2 inch of seam allowance. So I'm going to do about a 1/4 inch in from the edge of the fabric, and it's going to go pretty quickly because it's a long stitch. You might notice that as the fabric feeds in through the feed dogs, the 2 different types of fabric behave differently. This lighter weight fabric sometimes will pucker as it stitches, and you just kind of have to keep on top of it. Don't be afraid of it. You don't want it to actually pleat, but just understand that that is going to happen. Sometimes, here, let me get that needle out of the way. Even if you kind of pull down on the fabric here and here, just to kind of keep, without too much tension on the fabric, just to keep everybody feeding through evenly. In a later step, we're actually going to be stitching through 5 layers of fabric. So that might be a time that you'll want to, on the back side here, be able to adjust your feed dog or your presser foot pressure. You might need a little less pressure, and that can solve this puckering. But just speed along through it. We're going to do this on both sides, even if we lift up our, there we go. We're going to do this on both sides of this pairing, and then we're going to do it again on the other side. So we'll do a basting stitch down the side a total of 4 times. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that up, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Now I have both sides of this stitched down the side, and I've done the same to this guy. And so you can just kind of see a basting stitch going along on both sides, a pretty wide stitch, and now we're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, step 2 of the pattern is going to be to kind of get the pockets ready to roll. So I have my 2 fabric pieces, and for this I'm going to line them up with the right sides together, which is the printed side. Just get them all lined up and lay it down flat, and I'm going to, and my canvas doesn't have a right or a wrong side exactly, so I'm just going to lay that straight on there, make sure that lines up, and then you can see, so we've got a 3-layer cake here, right sides together of the cotton fabric, and then the canvas is on top. And we're gonna stitch, and this also might feel funny, but just go with Sandy, she knows what she's doing. Stitch up the side, across the top, and then back down. So we're gonna head over to the machine and do that next with this set, and then we'll also go ahead with the second pocket and do that. And we are well on our way. So this is our pocket, and remember we just sandwiched it, and we are going to stitch along both sides and across the top, and the top is the shorter length here up here. So we're going to start on one side. This is a construction stitch, so the seam allowance matters. We need it to be on the far left needle position, and then 2.5 for stitch length. You guys are used to this by now. Keep my needle dish handy. I'm going to start on the bottom, 1/2 inch seam allowance, but I'm going to start with a back stitch because we're actually going to turn this inside out in a second. So keep that stitch straight at 1/2 inch, go all the way to this corner, and then with the needle in the down position, lift that presser foot down, up, back down. I'm going to release a little more presser foot pressure. There we go. It's a lot of bulk to be stitching through. Right now we're stitching through 3 layers. And they just want to wiggle, so it's good that we have them pinned well. Okay. Needle down, presser foot up. Oh, looks like we need to go a little bit further. There we go. And now just off the edge, keep making sure all my fabric is pulled. When we turn this right side out, we want it to all be straight without puckers. There we go. And a back stitch. Now let's go turn it right side out. Before we turn this guy right side out, of course we want to take out the pins, but if you remember a couple lessons back we talked about clipping and notching. Here we're going to need to take away some of this bulk so that when we invert it, it's not all gathered up on the inside. So go ahead and trim top corners and then even these bottom corners here and here. So overall you've got it all trimmed, and now let's turn it right side out. Alright, as we turn this right side out, I just want to show you one quick thing. We've got 3 layers here, but we want these right sides that are together right now, we want those to be on the outside. So you're going to grab your canvas and one side with one hand and your other fabric with the other, and just turn it right side out like you would do with a pillowcase. Get your fingers in the corners, and I use little dowels, pointed ends, just to get those corners poked out well. And then you're going to press it, and I would say just before you press, just spray, spray, spray all 3 seams, and then just press it as evenly as you can so that that seam is out as far as it can be, and then we'll go top stitch. Okay, I'm all pressed on both sides. Make sure both sides are nicely pressed. We're going to do a top stitch all the way around where we just stitched, and now note that we are going to be stitching through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. So go ahead and release some presser foot tension if you can, because that's a lot to stitch through. We are gonna, let's see, have a stitch length of 3 or 3.5 because it can go a little longer. I'd say maybe a 3. And I'm gonna make my needle in the center position, and then I'm aligning the edge of my fabric with, excuse me, just the inside notch of my J-foot. So I'm going to have about a 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch allowance for my top stitch. And you don't need to back stitch on this, but you do need to get it started. It's a lot of fabric to stitch through, a lot of layers. Now just try and let it go through nice and easily. Keep this stitch as even as possible. It's going to show, and later on we're going to actually need to follow this stitch to attach it to the bag. We're going to want to top stitch over our top stitch. Get close to the edge. Lift and turn. Oop, not far enough. So bad at guessing that. Okay. Almost finished. And again, you don't need a back stitch here. So just finish it up and then do the same thing with your other pocket. So you'll have all of your canvas attached except for that bottom piece of canvas. But there's our top stitching. You can see it okay. We're ready to move on to the next step. Alright, now that we have everything top stitched, we're on to step 5. We need one of our outside fabrics that's stitched to the canvas and then one of our inside fabrics. I've got my pocket here that we just did, and I need to, this is where the marking of the notches matters. We get to line those up all in a row. On that one, I'm going to pin that one, and then I'm going to line this one up as well. And that feels great, and I think notches were a good choice for that. So we're going to pin them together in place, and then we're going to just run a stitch. If we can just overlap our top stitching so that we don't have 2 stitches showing, that's going to be the best case scenario. So let's go over to the machine, and then we'll just run stitches here and here, not across the bottom, not across the top. Can you see okay? Not across the bottom or top, but really be sure to reinforce this stitch here. Alright, let's stitch this pocket in place. Same settings as we just had, the 2.5 length, and we're going to be lining up this pocket the exact same place where we lined it up before. So I'm still keeping my needle in the center position, lining up the edge of this pocket with the inside opening of the presser foot. And so ideally, as long as I do that, I should be able to stitch right on top of the stitch that I just made. So let's get to it. We could do a little reinforcement stitch here. And, alright, let's go for it. It's a lot of layers, guys. I'll say it again. And then the most important thing here is going to be our reinforcement stitch at the top. We're going to go all the way to the edge this time, where last time we stopped and turned. Go all the way on it until we go one step over, and then back twice, forward twice, and back 2 more times. I don't want that to go anywhere. Alright. And we're going to do that on the other side of our pocket and then on the other side of the bag. So we'll do that action a total of 4 times.